The 24th annual Frederick Pickering Memorial Lecture took place at the Eileen L. Parsons Auditorium at the H. Lafferty Style Community College on Tuesday, January 17th, and was delivered this year by Attorney-at-Law Gerard Ferrara QC on the topic the 2007 Constitution and Good Governance in the Virgin Islands. Speaking on behalf of the Board of Management for the Frederick Pickering Memorial Foundation was former HLSCC President Dr. Michael O'Neill, who gave some background information on how the foundation began. Dr. O'Neill explained that an education trust was set up in the 60s for worthy Virgin Islanders who wanted to take advantage of a revolving loan fund to further their education. The trust would later become dormant, but under the efforts of its founder, Dr. Norwell Harrigan, it was revamped and named after a native Virgin Islander of whom all could be proud. That person was Frederick Pickering, the first Black Virgin Islander to administer the government of the Virgin Islands and to be honored by the Crown. Dr. O'Neill proceeded to give what little history is known about the early leader.
As strange as it may seem, we still know little about Frederick Pickering. From the burial records at St. George's Church, we know that he was born in 1835, but we have not been able to discover the exact date of his birth, since the records of that period, like him, have returned to dust. His early life is still shrouded in more or less mystery, but it is clear that at some time he was recruited to the civil service, where he attained the rank of clerk to the president. With the establishment of the Leeward Islands as a single federal colony, the office of the president was reduced in status. The holder ceased to be the direct representative of the Crown and was appointed instead by a commission from the governor with the approval of the Colonial Office in London. The president therefore became the representative of the governor. In 1884, when there were less than 50 English residents and with economic conditions rapidly deteriorating, Frederick Augustus Pickering was appointed to the office, perhaps in the circumstances only temporarily, which he retained until 1887. After his successor as head of the local government was again selected from the British Colonial Service, Pickering apparently reverted to his former position. In 1898, he was named a nominated member of the Legislative Council, a position he apparently retained until the council breathed its last on the 24th of March, 1902. He subsequently served as a nominated member of the Executive Council and was honored by the King by being allowed to retain his title, or the title Honorable, for his lifetime.
In delivering the lecture, Attorney Gerard Ferrara covered a multiplicity of issues surrounding constitutional advancements, the coming into force of the Constitution Order 2007, and the concept of good governance. Speaking on the history of the Virgin Islands, Ferrara said with the restoration of the legislature in 1950, the introduction of the ministerial system in 1967, and increased autonomy and decision-making power granted to local representatives, the territory was able to move off grant and aid and progressed into tourism and financial services as sources of revenue.
There is clear evidence that our local elected and non-elected representatives, emboldened by the agitations and enlightened ideas of activists such as Theodore Faulkner, I.G. Fonseca, Carlton de Castro, and H.R. Penn, and later by men like Noel Lloyd and Walter Lindy de Castro, made effective use of the increased autonomy and power afforded successive governments by the constitutional achievements achieved in 1967 and 1976 in particular. After the restoration of the Legislative Council in 1950 and the introduction of the ministerial system in 1967, our leaders with increased self-government were able to move this beloved country out of the darkness of a subsistence economy, relying on agriculture and fishing, and one which was generally ignored by the mother country, into the light of progress and increasing prosperity, with tourism initially and subsequently financial services being developed as the main drivers of our economic engine. These sectors generated revenues which enabled us to move off granting aid in 1978 and to become more self-sufficient as we strived collectively to shed the stigma of colonialism and usher in the dawn of a new era based on greater prosperity and financial independence.
Ferrara said that good governance has become a topical issue and one of the important tenets of the 1999 White Paper on Partnership for Progress and Prosperity. He suggested some ways in which the Virgin Islands can strengthen and improve institutions, good governance laws, and mechanisms.
These include an impartial and strict enforcement of the laws put in place to provide for transparency and accountability, regardless of nationality, identity, or other characteristics of the alleged transgressors. In other words, we must be self-policing. We must put above all other considerations the upholding of these important principles, laws, institutions, and mechanisms which underpin our democracy and government and foster a climate conducive to continued growth, development, and prosperity of our people and this beloved country. To the extent that we shirk from this responsibility and compromise these principles, we undermine the very fabric of our society. Most importantly, we put in jeopardy the level of autonomy and self-governance which we have fought for and achieved over the years since the reintroduction of the legislature in 1950, and compromise the aspirations of generations to come.
Mr. Ferrara also explored the importance to the Virgin Islands of the recent consultative process initiated by the UK government with its overseas territories, which is geared at carving out a new relationship for the future, and presented his suggestions to the 6 questions asked, as well as what basic principles and tenets should underpin a new white paper and partnership between the United Kingdom and its overseas territories, with particular emphasis on the Virgin Islands. You can watch Mr. Ferrara's speech in its entirety right here on JTV Channel 55 and also at jtvlive.net.